The forgotten voice the wind howled over the dry sands of Vultra Ix. It was a dead world now, quiet, broken, and full of secrets. Only a few human settlers lived there, mostly scientists and traders. They came for the rare crystals buried under the desert, not for its ghosts. But there was one ghost everyone talked about. She was not really a ghost, of course. She was alive, an alien widow named Yllari. Her skin was pale silver, her eyes always distant, like she was staring at something. Far away, something others couldn't see. Every morning, she walked to the edge of the colony and whispered to the sand. Then, she shouted in a strange alien tongue and vanished into the dunes. "Don't listen to her," the townspeople always said. "She's mad," Mason had heard that warning 100 times since he arrived. He was a young human researcher, assigned to study ancient alien signals from Vultra Ix. Most days, his work was boring, just sitting with machines, listening to static. But today felt different. He saw her again. Yllari stood on a broken stone wall just outside the old mining station. Her arms were raised, her hair blowing like black silk in the wind. She was speaking again, loud but calm. Mason couldn't understand the words, but he felt the meaning. It was like a warning. "Crazy old widow," said Officer Bren, walking past Mason. "Been out there for 10 years. Claims her husband's still alive beneath the sand." "Ha, that man's bones are probably dust." Mason nodded, but his eyes stayed on Yllari. There was something about her, something that didn't feel mad at all. That night, Mason couldn't sleep. Her voice echoed in his ears. "They're not dead. They're sleeping." Sleeping? He got up, grabbed his scanner, and sneaked out of the colony. He followed the trail Yllari had taken earlier. The desert was cold now, the wind sharp, but he kept going. After almost an hour, he found her. She sat beside a half-buried stone structure shaped like a dome. Her hands were on the surface, glowing slightly as she hummed a low song. "You followed me," she said without turning. Mason froze. I didn't mean to spy. You heard them too," she interrupted. Her voice was soft but heavy, like it carried sorrow from another world. "Heard who?" She finally looked at him. "The ones who sleep." Mason stepped closer. "You mean ... your husband?" Her eyes narrowed. "Not just him. All of them." She stood and placed her hand on the dome. It lit up under her fingers, dim blue lights blinking like a heart slowly waking up. "What is this place?" Mason asked, stepping beside her. "A cradle," she whispered. "A tomb. A prison. It depends on who tells the story." He scanned the dome. The readings were strange, nothing like human tech, and yet familiar in structure. Old, powerful, and still alive. "This is alien tech," he said. "Ancient." She nodded. "The humans forgot. The council erased it. But the sand remembers. I remember." Mason didn't know what to say. He had studied the history of Vultra Ix. According to records, there had been a short war here long ago, but nothing special. The aliens had lost. The humans moved in. End of story. But what if it wasn't the end? He looked again at Yllari. She was touching the dome with both hands now. The glow was growing brighter. A soft hum filled the air. "Why do you talk to it?" he asked. "Because he listens," she replied. Suddenly, the ground beneath the dome trembled. Mason jumped back. The scanner in his hand beeped wildly. The sand was moving, like something far below was shifting, waking up. "What was that?" Yllari looked calm. "You woke it too." Mason stared at her. "I didn't do anything." "No. You listened." Behind them, a flash of red light shot up into the night sky, a warning signal. Someone back at the colony must have seen the power surge. "We have to go," he said. "They'll be coming." She shook her head slowly. "Let them come. The truth has already heard your voice." Mason felt his heart racing. What truth? What had he stepped into? But deep down he knew this was no madwoman. This was someone who had held pain for years, Someone who had waited for one person to listen. And now he had as they disappeared into the dunes together. The dome behind them pulsed softly in the sand like a heartbeat ready to rise. The next morning, the colony was tense. Bright red lights still blinked on the command tower. Security officers moved through the dusty streets, scanning everything. Rumors spread like fire. Another sandquake. Alien tech might be active again. It's that widow's fault. Mason kept his head low as he walked through the colony. He hadn't told anyone where he had gone last night. If they knew he had followed the alien widow, Yulari, out into the dunes, he might be kicked off the planet, or worse. But he couldn't forget what he saw: the strange dome, her glowing hands, the ground shaking, and her words. He listens. Mason reached the research lab and locked the door behind him. He sat at his console and replayed the scanner data from last night. Energy spikes, electromagnetic pulses. A weak signal coming from beneath the ground. He ran the data again. The signal wasn't just noise. It was a message. Mason's fingers froze over the keyboard. The signal was in an old alien language, long buried in history. Only someone like Yulari could understand it. But one word kept repeating, and it was translated automatically: awake. Mason leaned back in his chair, his heart thudding. Something buried in the sand was trying to wake up. He opened the secure archive and began searching for old records, anything about Veltra X before the war, before the colony. Most files were heavily redacted. Whole pages were blacked out. But one image caught his eye. It showed a large underground structure beneath the desert, and the file name? Project Sleeper. Mason shut the file quickly. He knew someone was watching. The colony monitored what researchers accessed. He had to go back out there. But this time, not alone. That night, Mason slipped into the shadows near the wall and waited. She came exactly as before, barefoot, silent, her dark hair braided with tiny bones. Her eyes caught his in the moonlight. "You returned," she said. "I have questions," Mason replied. "And I think you have answers." Yulari didn't smile, but her eyes softened. She turned and began walking into the desert. He followed. They walked for almost an hour in silence. The stars above were clear, the wind whispering softly across the sand. "Your people," Mason finally said. "They built something underground. Something still alive." "Yes," she answered. "Why did you call it a cradle?" "Because it holds life." "Whose life?" She stopped walking. They stood near the dome again, half buried but pulsing faintly under the sand. She turned to him, "My husband. And others like him. Warriors, scientists, dreamers. They chose to sleep when the war was lost. They believed one day the truth would be needed. That one day someone would listen. And you waited all this time? I had no choice. My bond with him, my soul, is linked to the vault. If I leave, it breaks. If he wakes and I am not here, he will die." Mason stepped closer to the dome and placed his hand on it. The surface was warm. "Why now?" he asked. "Why is it waking up after all these years?" Yellari's voice was quiet. "Because the lie is starting to crack. Your people forgot, but the past never sleeps forever." Mason looked at her. "I think I found something in the colony system. Something called Project Sleeper." Yellari's face darkened. "That was the human name for it," she said. "They feared us, so when the war ended, they covered everything. They called us unstable, dangerous, mad, and when I refused to leave, they called me broken." She placed both hands on the dome again. Blue light spread slowly across the stone, but we were never dead, just buried. Suddenly, the ground shook stronger than last time. Mason stumbled back. A long crack opened beside the dome, and sand began to fall in. Below, something huge stirred. A faint voice echoed up through the crack. It was deep, broken, like wind blowing through metal. "Yulari." Mason's breath caught in his throat. He heard it too. It wasn't a machine. It was a voice. Yulari knelt beside the crack, tears in her eyes. "He's waking," she whispered. "He felt you. Your presence, your belief." It reached him. Mason felt cold. "What happens when he wakes?" She looked up at him. "Then the galaxy will remember everything it tried to forget." Far off in the distance, searchlights swept the sand. The colony had sent a patrol. "We need to go," Mason said. "No," Yulari said firmly. "We stay. They will come. And they must see the truth with their own eyes." "But they'll arrest you." She turned to him. "They already buried me once. I am not afraid." Mason stood beside her. The whisper rose again from the crack. A language ancient, powerful, full of sorrow and warning. This wasn't just a buried man. This was the beginning of a buried truth waking up. One whisper at a time. The desert wind had stopped. The silence around the cracked dome was heavy, almost alive. Mason stood beside Yulari, staring down into the dark opening in the sand. From below, that voice still echoed faint, ancient, calling her name like a lost prayer. Yulari had not moved. Her eyes were fixed on the opening, and her hands were trembling slightly. For the first time, Mason realized something. She wasn't just a widow waiting in grief. She was afraid. "Is it him?" Mason asked, stepping closer. "Yes," she whispered. "But he is not whole." "What do you mean?" "He has been dreaming too long. The cryo bond was only meant for 100 years. It's been over 600. His mind may not remember who he is, or who I am." Mason looked down into the crack. The sand had fallen deeper overnight, exposing what looked like the top of a metal hatch. Symbols glowed faintly across it, curved. Lines like rivers, pulsing blue and white. "I want to see what's inside," he said. The eye slowly turned to him. "Once the seal is broken, there is no return. No hiding. The truth will rise, even if no one wants to hear it." Mason took a breath, then let it rise. He climbed down carefully, sliding on the loose sand until he reached the hatch. It was cold to the touch. As soon as he placed both hands on it, the symbols flared brighter. Above, Yulari closed her eyes and began to hum softly. Her voice was low, strange, full of rhythm that didn't sound human at all. The hatch responded. With a hiss, it opened. Warm air burst from the darkness below. Not hot, but filled with a strange charge like a thunderstorm waiting underground. Mason coughed and waved away dust. A narrow tunnel led downward into the stone. He looked up at Yulari. "Are you coming?" She opened her eyes and nodded. "I've been waiting to return for a long time." Together, they stepped inside. The walls of the tunnel glowed softly with light from within the stone itself. Strange alien plants had grown along the edges, their roots glowing faint green. The air felt humid and full of age. After a few minutes of walking, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. Mason stopped in awe. It was a giant hall, carved from stone but lined with metallic ribs. Dozens of sealed pods stood in circles like a forest of upright coffins. Each pod held a figure. Some were large, some thin, all silent. Glowing liquid filled them, and strange cables ran into their spines. Yulari walked slowly to the center of the room. She placed a hand on one of the pods. "This was our final temple," she said softly. "When the war was lost, we chose silence over slavery. We sealed ourselves in this cradle and gave the galaxy the lie it wanted, that we were gone." Mason stared at the pod. Inside, the figure looked tall and strong, with lines of silver on his skin. His eyes were closed, but his hands were clenched into fists. "That's your husband?" he asked. Yulari nodded. "His name was Kelra. He was our memory keeper, everything we knew. He holds inside him." Mason stepped back, looking at the other pods. "And the others?" "Leaders, scientists, witnesses, all the ones who saw the betrayal." Mason turned sharply. What betrayal? Yulari faced him. The Council, your human leaders. They promised peace, but only if we surrendered our history. They erased our archives, burned our cities, and silenced our voices. I was allowed to live, but only because I pretended to be mad. She looked away, and after a while, even I wondered if I really was. Mason felt the weight of her words. He walked to the edge of the chamber, where a console blinked with alien script. He pulled out his portable translator and began scanning. It took a few minutes, but the symbols finally began to make sense. Memory. Core. Locked authority key. Missing warning. Mental degradation at 61%. Emergency restore available. They're breaking down. Mason said, if we don't do something, these people won't survive much longer. Yulari stepped beside him. There is one way, but it is dangerous. She placed her hand over the console and closed her eyes. A glowing tendril of light emerged from the panel and connected to her palm. Her body shook and her breathing quickened. Mason reached to pull her away, but she raised her other hand. No. This is the link, she gasped. This is what he needs to remember me. The light grew brighter. Suddenly, one of the pods let out a deep chime. The fluid inside began to drain. Slowly, the figure inside moved, first the hand, then the head. The eyes blinked open. Mason stepped back. They were glowing white. Yulari. The figure said, voice rough like dry leaves. Tears ran down her cheeks. I'm here. He stumbled forward from the pod, barely able to stand. His body trembled. He looked at Mason, confused. Who? He's a human, Yulari said gently. He listened. The man looked at Mason, then back at Yulari. Then the time has come, he whispered. They must hear the truth we died to protect. And in that sealed chamber beneath the sand, a new storm of memory began to rise, ready to shake the galaxy. Eel-Re sat on the cold floor of the sealed chamber, his body still weak from centuries of sleep. His skin shimmered under the chamber. Lights like old silver touched by moonlight. He looked up at Yulari, his bondmate, the widow who had waited for him beyond time. I thought I would wake to fire, he said quietly. But I see your face instead. Yulari knelt beside him and gently took his hand. I sang to the stars until they remembered you. Mason stood at a distance, stunned. A moment ago, this man had been frozen in a pod for over 600 years. Now he sat, alive, breathing, speaking, remembering, or at least trying to. Don't understand, Mason said. How are you still alive after so long? How did your body not fail? Kelrau looked at him with tired eyes. The bond, he said. The one Yulari kept alive. It was never just love. It was life itself. She carried my memory, he continued. But there are pieces missing. I remember pain. I remember betrayal. I remember the humans who came to make peace, and then erased us. Mason nodded slowly. They called it a treaty, but it was more like a cover-up. Kelra's fingers tightened. Then we must show. You. He rose with Yulari's help and walked toward the memory wall, an ancient screen built into the stone. It had been quiet for centuries, but as he approached, it began to pulse with light. Yulari joined him. Together, they placed their palms on the surface. Mason watched as the wall came alive. Colors flooded the air, floating images, moving shadows, voices from the past. It was like standing in the middle of a dream made real. This is our memory vault, Yulari said. The truth they tried to bury. The images sharpened. A human fleet arriving in orbit. Alien diplomats greeting them with gifts. Talks of peace. But then violence. Human soldiers storming temples. Libraries burning. Alien elders dragged into the streets. They told us peace was possible, Kelra said, voice full of pain. But they feared what we knew. Our minds held technology and truth older than Earth itself. They wanted control, not friendship. The vision showed Yllari screaming as her people were taken. Kelra was seen fighting, then choosing to enter the vault. His body entered the pod. His mind was sealed with memories too dangerous to let die. They called her mad, Mason whispered, watching the flames. All this time, she was the only one telling the truth. They made me watch, Yllari said, tears sliding down her face. They let me live so I would suffer. They thought I would break. But you didn't, Mason said. You waited. More. Images filled the chamber. Hidden documents. Forged peace records. Deleted maps. Even images of high-ranking humans signing orders to destroy alien archives. Mason's jaw clenched. If this gets out, the Galactic Council will collapse. They need to fall, Kelra said. Or the galaxy will keep building on lies. Mason turned to him. But why now? Why wake now after all these years? Kelra stared at him. Because you listened. Mason felt a chill. Just days ago, he had ignored the widow like everyone else. But something had made him follow. Something had drawn him in. I'm just one man, he said. What can I do? You are human, Kelra said. If the truth comes from you, they cannot silence it so easily. Suddenly, alarms echoed faintly through the chamber. The air changed. They found us, Yllari said, standing quickly. The colony patrols. Then we don't have much time, Mason said. We have to get this memory out. He reached for his datapad and linked it to the wall. The data began to download, slow but steady. Then he looked at Kelra. You need to come with us. Kelra shook his head. I cannot. My body is failing. The cryo damage is too deep. But I can last a little longer, Kelra said. Long enough to make sure the truth survives. He walked to a control node and activated the chamber's emergency beacon. A low hum vibrated the floor. All pods will begin to fail. Soon, he said. They must be opened, or they will die inside. But we'll be surrounded any minute, Mason said. Yllari stepped forward. We can't abandon them. We won't, Mason said. But we'll need help from people who still believe in truth. The download finished. Mason pulled the device free and slid it into a hidden pouch on his belt. Suddenly, a deep boom echoed through the tunnel. They're breaching the outer wall, Yllari said. Mason looked at Kelra. Are you sure you can't come? Kelra smiled weakly. I've already done my part. Now go and make them remember. Yllari kissed his forehead, her hands shaking. I'll come back for you. No, he said. You go forward. Take our story with you. As Mason and Yllari fled through the tunnel with the truth burning in Mason's pocket, behind them, Kelra stood alone in the center of the chamber, surrounded by sleeping souls and forgotten memories. The world above still believed the lie, but that was about to change. Mason and Yllari burst out of the tunnel just as the night sky flashed red. Sirens blared across the colony walls. Security drones flew in circles above, scanning the sand. Footsteps echoed nearby sharp, fast, getting closer. We're not going to make it back unseen, Mason panted, holding the memory drive tight under his coat. They're everywhere. Yllari didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, on a patch of desert where the wind didn't move, where the sand looked still. Follow me, she said. She turned sharply and ran, her bare feet almost silent against the ground. Mason hesitated for just a second before chasing after her. Behind them, voices shouted, Stop! Unauthorized movement detected. Return to the colony perimeter immediately. Mason didn't stop. He followed Yllari into the still sand. As soon as they crossed into the area, the noise behind them faded. The wind stopped. The air grew thicker. What is this place? Mason asked, breathless. It's called the Quiet Zone, she replied without slowing down. Your machines won't work here. They never understood why, so they avoided it. He glanced at his scanner. It was dead above them. The drones hovered at the edge of the zone, refusing to enter. Mason allowed himself one deep breath. Okay, that bought us time. Now what? We find the seer. Mason frowned. Who? Yulari turned and faced him. An old friend. She once served the council, until she saw what they did to us. She went silent and walked away from the stars, but she still listens. Mason nodded. He didn't understand everything Yulari said, but he trusted her now. She had waited centuries to speak, and he had no intention of letting her voice go unheard. They moved through the quiet dunes. For nearly an hour, the sky dark above them. Then, at last they saw it, a small, cracked dome made of dark crystal, half buried in the sand. Yulari stepped forward and placed her hand on the surface. A pulse rippled through the ground. The crystal shimmered, and the wall melted open, like water. Inside sat a woman, tall, glowing faintly, her skin marked with ancient symbols. Her eyes opened slowly, glowing violet in the dim light. You returned, the seer said. After all this time, Yulari stepped in. I found a listener. The seer looked at Mason. She tilted her head slightly. A human. I'm surprised. So am I, Mason said. Yulari took the memory drive from Mason's coat and placed it on the stone table in the middle of the chamber. This holds the truth, she said. The real story. If we can broadcast it, if we can get it to the right channels, the council will fall. The seer nodded slowly. And they will fight back. I know, Mason said. They're already coming. The seer placed both hands over the drive. Light swirled around her fingers as she scanned the data. Her voice dropped. This changes everything. Then suddenly, the light blinked red. Yulari froze. What is it? The seer's face turned serious. They've planted a tracker inside the memory code. A silent trace. It's sending our location. Mason cursed under his breath. They're using the truth to find us? The seer looked at Yulari. You have to leave now. I'll hold them here. No, Yulari said. You'll be captured. I'm already gone, the seer said calmly. I am only shadow now. Let them chase a ghost. She lifted a long staff from behind her seat and raised it. A deep hum filled the chamber. Mason's skin tingled. What are you doing? He asked. Creating a silence so wide, even fear cannot find you. The seer said. The walls of the dome began to shimmer, and the light outside bent like glass. Go east, the seer instructed. Find the mountain. Inside, there's an old rebel relay tower. You can send a message from there. Yulari placed a hand on the seer's arm. Thank you. Run, she whispered. Mason and Yulari turned and fled into the night. Behind them, the dome of crystal vanished completely. By the time the drones arrived, there was nothing left but sand. Hours passed. The sun began to rise slowly over the dunes as Mason and Yulari climbed the sharp rocks of the eastern hills. Every step was heavier than the last. Mason's legs ached and his throat was dry, but the memory drive in his coat felt heavier than all of it. It held the voices of the past, the fire of truth, and the price of silence. At last, they reached the edge of a canyon. In the shadow of the cliff stood a broken tower, leaning slightly but still standing, its signal dish pointed at the sky. That's it, Yulari said. The relay, Mason nodded. Let's wake the galaxy. And behind them, far out on the sands, the council's hunters kept coming, fast, armed, and ready to silence the truth once again. But this time, someone would speak. Asterisk, the old tower groaned as the wind pushed against it. Rust flaked from the steel bones, and broken wires hung like vines. But somehow, the ancient rebel relay still stood silent. Waiting, Mason placed his hand on the door's rusted control panel. Nothing happened. He tried again, pressing harder, jiggling the wires, still nothing. Let me try, Yulari said softly. She stepped forward and placed her palm on the rusted metal. Her skin shimmered faintly, and the markings on her fingers began to glow. A deep click echoed from within the door. Then, slowly, it opened. Inside, the tower was full of dust and shadows. The walls were lined with dead screens and shattered consoles. Old rebel signs, painted in alien languages, covered the metal, some angry, some hopeful. Mason walked to the main terminal and wiped away layers of sand. He sat down and powered up his datapad, connecting it to the relay's interface dock. To his surprise, the system responded. "Still breathing," he whispered. "Just barely." He inserted the memory drive and waited. The screen blinked once, then again, then filled with flowing code. Yalari stood behind him, her arms crossed tightly. "How long?" "5 minutes," Mason said, "if the relay holds." Outside, the sky was brightening. But the peace didn't last. The LAR turned sharply. Her ears twitched. "They're near." Mason looked at her. "You sure?" "Yes. I can feel them. They're not soldiers. They're the black signals." Mason's blood ran cold. Everyone in the colonies had heard of the black signal units, elite human agents used to erase problems quietly. They didn't speak. They didn't ask questions. And no one they chased ever lived to talk about it. "We can't stop now," Mason said. "This message has to go through." He worked faster, fingers flying over the keys. The screen lit up. Broadcast channels unlocked, encrypted signals opening. Then the message began. A voice spoke through the relay. Not Mason's voice, not Yellari's. It was Kelra's. "To all people across the stars, listen." The recording played the sealed memory. Vault the war, the betrayal, the council's lies. It showed the ancient chambers, the sleeping pods, the burning cities. It ended with a single phrase, repeated in dozens of alien tongues. "We are not dead. We remember." The screen flashed broadcast in progress. It was working. But then boom. The tower shook violently. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Mason jumped from the seat and looked toward the door. Black-clad figures stepped into view, their helmets smooth and empty. No eyes. No voices. They raised their weapons. Yalari stepped in front of Mason. Her hands sparked with faint energy. "I'll hold them off." "You can't fight them alone," he said. "I have no choice." The black signals opened fire-blue plasma bolts, tearing into the metal walls. Sparks flew everywhere. Yalari raised her hands, and a shimmering wall of energy flared up in front of them, blocking the shots. She screamed as the shield held. Mason ran back to the console. The broadcast had reached 83%. He grit his teeth. Almost there. Another blast struck the ceiling. The tower groaned louder. Yellari's shield cracked. One bolt slipped through, grazing her shoulder. She stumbled but stayed standing, forcing herself to hold the shield steady. "You must survive," she said through clenched teeth. "They can't erase you too." Mason looked at her, really looked. She wasn't just a widow. She was a warrior. A memory keeper, the last voice of a silenced people. "No," he said. "We finish this together." The broadcast hit 94%. A drone flew in through the shattered wall, targeting the console. Mason didn't think. He lunged at it, smashing it with a broken metal pipe. The drone fell in a shower of sparks. 98%. The tower swayed. Yalari collapsed to her knees, blood running from her arm. The shield flickered, weak. The black signals moved forward. Weapons raised. 99%. Mason pulled Yalari to him, shielding her body with his own. 100%. Broadcast complete. The relay flashed green, then exploded in sparks. But the message was gone, sent across the galaxy. To every colony, every outpost, every hidden corner. The truth had been spoken. The room fell silent. The black signals lowered their weapons. One of them stepped forward and touched the side of his helmet. A voice echoed through the radio. Stand down. Order override. Public leak confirmed. Extraction no longer required. They turned and walked away, vanishing into the light. Mason couldn't believe it. We did it. Yulari smiled weakly. Then he can rest now. They will remember him. Mason helped her to her feet. Together, they looked out at the rising sun. Far away, across stars and systems. The message was waking people up. Eyes were opening, questions were being asked, and the silence was finally breaking. 3 days after the broadcast, the galaxy changed. It didn't happen with explosions or warships, but in quiet whispers. In markets, in starports, in classrooms, people talked. People questioned. People remembered. The message from Veltra X had reached over 200 systems in under an hour, and no one could stop it. Mason and Yulari watched it unfold from a small cave in the southern cliffs of the desert. She was still recovering, her shoulder wrapped in bandages, her body weak from shielding him during the attack. He stayed by her side, watching her sleep, watching the stars flicker overhead like they were listening now too. The wind outside was gentle, like the planet itself had softened. A crackling came from Mason's communicator, the old rebel radio. He had fixed using parts from the relay tower. For 2 days, it had been full of static. Now it spoke. To whoever sent the Veltra X broadcast, this is Fleet Captain Arlen Voss of the Outer Rim Defense Circle. We received your message. And we believe you. We're coming. Mason leaned forward. Yulari, wake up. She stirred slowly. Did they answer? He smiled. Yes, someone's coming. Someone who believes. She sat up, breathing deeply, her face lit by the early morning light. The galaxy never wanted to remember us, she said. But now it doesn't have a choice. He nodded. Your people will be known again. The Council can't bury the truth anymore. Far off in the distance, a dark line of smoke rose into the sky. The colony was burning not from attack, but from inside. Protests, uprisings, fear. When people heard the truth, many turned on their leaders, but others had simply left. Some had started walking toward the desert. Pilgrims, scholars, ordinary. People who wanted to see the vault with their own eyes. They came looking for proof. They came looking for her. Yulari, the Mad Widow, had become something new, the first voice. She didn't want to be famous. She didn't even want revenge. She just wanted one thing, to walk into the chamber again and say goodbye. By the time they returned to the dome, the sand had shifted. The hatch was buried, but Yulari walked straight to the right spot and placed her hand on the earth. It moved for her. Mason followed as she stepped into the darkness once more, down into the quiet cradle of truth. The chamber was cold now. Most of the pods were empty, faded, or dead. But one still stood open. Kel Raz. He wasn't inside. His body had turned to dust. Only his armor remained, folded neatly in front of the pod. On top of it was something glowing faintly, his soul crystal. It pulsed gently, like a final heartbeat. Yulari picked it up and pressed it to her forehead. I waited, she whispered. And I kept my promise. Mason stood back, letting her have the moment. Then she turned to him. Will they honor us now, do you think? Mason nodded. Yes, maybe not all, but enough. And sometimes, that's how history begins. They walked back out of the chamber, this time not as fugitives, not as broken souls, but as witnesses. Outside, a group of people waited. Humans, aliens, reporters, even council defectors. They had seen the broadcast. They had read the decoded files. They knew now. A young girl stepped forward and held out a small data chip. Miss Yulari, this holds our family record. My grandmother said we had alien blood, but we never believed her. Until your story. Yulari took the chip with shaking hands. Thank you. More came forward. More offered stories, names, memories. The past wasn't dead. It had only been sleeping. Just like her husband. And now it was awake. Weeks passed. Mason sat at a hearing table in the Galactic Council's central dome. His face was tired but calm. Across from him were hundreds of counselors, leaders, delegates, even war generals. All of them watching him. A projection floated behind him, images from the vault, from the pods, from the sealed memory core. Mason stood and spoke. "I am not a hero," he said. "I didn't set out to destroy the council. I just listened to one voice everyone told me to ignore. A voice that spoke the truth when no one else would. And you, all of you, need to ask why you ever stopped listening." Silence followed. Then one counselor stood and removed her crest badge. And another, and another. The old walls of silence began to fall. On Veltra X, the dome had become sacred ground. Not a tourist site, not a war zone. Just a place where voices, once lost, could now be heard. Yulari remained there, not as a prisoner of memory, but its protector. People came to learn from her. She told stories, not of war, but of love, of waiting, of choosing to remember even when the galaxy forgot. One day, Mason returned with new visitors, young researchers, who wanted to help preserve the vault. He found her standing at the edge of the dunes, looking at the stars. "They still talk, you?" "No," she said softly. "Who?" Mason asked. "The ones who sleep." He nodded. "I hear them too now." She turned to him and smiled. "Then maybe the galaxy finally has a future worth remembering." And above them, the stars blinked like they were listening, like they always had. The end.